goals, 100% 64-bit. So everything about this is all advanced, new drives. The downside is that some of the older drives they don't support, and you end up having to ask them for support. They will add them, and so, but right away you may not have the oldest drive support, but typically newer stuff it does. It is faster than the DeepSpar. It images because it can do 64-bit memory chunks and dump data to memory in bigger chunks before it actually writes it to a hard drive. So in the process of doing this, it is upwards of 500 gigs an hour in order to actually copy a drive. So it's roughly on a DeepSpar about 300-ish gigs an hour. So you're doing 20% more, whatever, something in that neighborhood. So the way that the Atolla works is everything is these plug-in menus. So you can keep adding sources, destinations, devices, things like that. There's a limited number of source ports, but usually it's USB and one source for IDE and one source for SATA. So all the channels all have them. Then there's target destinations, and so you put your drives on the target, and then you'll actually treat them all separately. So as you move, this is basically the menuing system. So here I'm on this drive, I have these functions. When I come over to this drive, I have a different set of functions. So this is my target, and so as I pop over to here, now it switches to that drive and its functions. So I can do basically some of the same stuff. I can do diagnostics and things like that, but this is meant to be a target drive. So my drive should be good, and I should be writing data from the source to the target. So in this process, what's happening is their idea was first you start off with your source drive, you power it up, and you go through this process, and then you go through a re-identification process, pops up a box, looks at the drive to see what's plugged in, and if it can ID, and you can get the same stuff, serial number, model number, and that data, then you can physically work on it. Now, it does have more hardware to talk to the device, so you can sometimes see other stuff. So it's got a breakdown of the device, and then you can start seeing what happened to this device. Your first button is typically going to be this. You go to Diagnostics, and you have an automatic checkup. When you hit this button, it will automatically start trying to run through these areas and test the drive to see what is the condition of the drive. So you'll see it powers down the drive, powers it back up, tries to populate the board, checks the board, and then we'll start going through the list. The board, the heads, the media, firmware, and the file system. And then try to predict whether or not you can image this drive or not. And so it'll make a really nice, pretty little report as well that you can export. And as it steps through each one of the conditions, you'll get some advancement, at least in this process. So it's jumping around, trying to do timing of the heads. That's something that is unique, and I asked him for so we could tell whether or not you can see if a head is taking more time to read than the other head. So in this one, there are two heads, and you can see how fast that they are, and if they're around about the same time, it will be fine, give you the OK symbol. If they are not, it'll tell you a head is degraded, and that you can turn off an individual head to image everything else and then come back and deal with the degraded head. So even if it reads and it's not as fast as the other one, it'll give you that information. So it's done. It's run through its check. It did not find any major errors, and it's trying to tell me I could image this drive. It's going to take 1 hour and 9 minutes. So here's what the whole report looks like. Basically, starts out with the basic information, gives you its log. This is your power. So you can tell what kind of hard drive do I have hooked up.
Laptop.
It's a laptop drive. I only have a 5-volt circuit. I don't have a 12-volt circuit. So I'm looking at a laptop Western Digital 320. It checks the boards by doing basically a checkerboard pattern over memory. Now it looks at the individual heads. I have 2 heads in this device. If it detects the heads, I can control the heads. Now this is something that is not in the current version of the task force. The task force does most of this other stuff. It does not detect the individual heads and then split the heads out individually at all. It currently is only imaging. So now you can see in each position how fast the head is and what its response is, and then its overall time and speed. You can still see that the head number 1 is faster than head number 2. Or head 1 is faster than 0. Then it checks outside, middle, and inside, so that way if it's a Western Digital, you can try to make sure that the heads are all working and that the board is working, because this is another problem with the board when the last ones don't work but the first ones do, or vice versa. That's a board problem on a Western Digital. And then it double checked to see if you could talk to data. There's a security mode, and you can see the security mode in the firmware. If somebody added a password, then when you try to copy a sector, it will give you an error. But everything about the drive seems fine. So when you get the error, you can double check what's called the passport information, and it will tell you, do I need to clear a password, or do I have a password on the drive? You can see it in a firmware request. It will tell you that in the passport. So this one, that's what it checked. It just checked to see whether or not it reported that. So in this case, it did not, and so it is fine. And then it's telling you what your HPA content and your DCO content are. And then it pulls your smart table. And so now this is what we normally look at to see if there's any errors. So this reallocated sector count is 0. So right now there hasn't been any remapped sectors. There's no glist. So right now, as far as we know, the glist has not added anything to it. And then some other data that you can review if you need to. That's the one I care about, though. Then it gives you your temperature and how physically at least it's running. And then that it's okay. And then there's no file system, because there is no file system it knows of on this drive. So after you've done this, if you make it this far and this is good and it's working, then you can come down here to imaging. And then this is where you would start your imaging process. You create a new session. It'll ask you where do you want to write it to. So I have a destination drive done. Then I say select. Now it'll ask you what do you want to do. Now if I had data on the drive, there is a function called all sectors with metadata or all sectors with data. If it's all sectors with data, it looks at the bitmap and does allocated versus unallocated. If you say all sectors with metadata, it does the MFT and the bitmap and all those pieces without the data. Like it actually makes you your tree. Does that make sense? So those are what I'm breaking down from that list. So in this case, I can't do data or metadata because there isn't any. I don't have a partition on here. So I could make one, but at the moment I don't have one. So I'm going to do all of those. Now, I think, Patrick, you asked me about heads, right? Turn on. So this is where that is. If the heads are detected, there's a spot right here. You expand that, and then before you create your session, you can check and uncheck them. I don't recall if you can do it after, I'm not sure you can do it after you created the session. I think you have to make a new session with the other head. Is that right?
Yeah,
that's
right.
right.
I think you can just turn the head, like, what, I guess, you know, when it shows you that nice little display, which head is reading what section, I think you can turn the head, what head you're seeing on.
You can edit a session, but you have to stop it first and all that.
Are you talking about in diagnostics?
Yeah, I think so.
In the diagnostics mode when I did this?
Once you get imaging, right, and it starts showing you, here's your progress bar, right, I think you can turn the head map on in there.
I think there's a checkbox in the process. Is that what you're saying? I think so. I'm trying to remember. I'm not sure originally it was, and maybe they added it in an update.
Yeah.
But so before the session, there was a time you couldn't do it in the session.
Right.
So when I first started doing it, I'm up to date now, I believe. I believe I'm at the current, whatever the current-ish release is. So let's do, these are your passes. Let me show you the passes. This is basically the same exact settings that I showed you in the deep spar. You can do 4 different passes. Well, these are the 4 different passes. This is their version of that. And so the first time is if something takes too long, jump a million. If it's as it goes through each one of the passes. So it starts with 1, it'll go that way. Then you can choose which way. Remember I told you can go backwards? You can disable the cache on the drive. This is the local cache on the drive. So if I have a drive with 64 megs of cache, this turns it off. And then I can switch to PIO mode. If it is not PIO mode, it is DMA mode. So this is the defaults for those. So what I'd really want to do, which isn't done here, like these are just multiple passes, I would have wanted the second pass to be backwards. And then maybe the second pass I want PIO mode, so I'm doing something different. And maybe the third pass, which will be slower, I don't want to use the cache. So that way I can whittle away at my problems. And then I would save these settings. And then you could tell it to email you if you can get access to whatever the email server is that their configuration is. But it'll, if you at least have it on the internet, I don't, then it'll email you when I'm done. So now I can say start imaging, and then it'll make me a nice little pretty thing. Yes, kill my data. And now it will start imaging. And so now, this is your overview. Now, here's the thing. If it detected heads, if it could figure it out, it color codes them. So each one of those stripes is a different head. So that's how it's doing it, so you can see where the heads and what the problem might be. And so this is an overview of the entire drive from end to end, however many sectors that it is. And there is a zoom feature, and once you activate it, it zooms in to a smaller subset, so you could see how much of that character that it's missing or not missing. It's a little bit better. It's not as granular as the deep spar. You cannot see real detailed layout of it from that standpoint. And you can click anywhere you want and it'll jump ahead. So basically you can control your jumping. Like I can come over here and I can say, hey, I would like you to start there. Bam, and now my head will jump over there and it'll start imaging from there. So I can control its physical location in this process. So, and then the activate zoom, it's a stupid, like you have to have a key, there's a key that, so once you've activated it, the reason that it doesn't activate right away is because of memory. And so they'll tell you right now, if you want to zoom in or out, shift and the left mouse button. So shift and the left mouse button. Now I'm in a smaller area and you can still kind of zoom around, so wherever it is that you want to see, where is it? So now you're into a more detailed position, so you can see it a little bit better. But it is not as granular as reading a sector on the deep spar from that standpoint. So that's the overview from that. Now, in the process you can skip to the next head. If there's a head problem and you see a head problem, there is a legend that tells you, I think it's also calculating headers. No, that's the regular legend. There is a header location.
Yeah, if you click on the found signature on the left.
Where is it?
Right above there?
Right here. Oh, there it is. So it pops out the little window for, as it's carving, as it's imaging, it's looking at the headers. It's not actually carving the files, though. It does nothing but give you information. So when you click that button, that's all you're seeing is how many documents, as it finds them on the hard drive, what those headers and that information is. So it's actually taking some speed to do that in this process, but every time it hit the beginning of one, it started trying to calculate that location. Then the other thing, so it's not useful for anything except information. It just kind of gives you sanity check. Oh yeah, I got some Word documents. It's not encrypted. It's not any of those kind of things. So the next thing is this box down here. So this box is what gives you, and I don't have a big enough screen. So this box right here is in hex showing you the data that's going by. Now I have 0, so you can see it going by. They're all zeros. So these are the sectors updating, and this entire block is 0. The more time you give it, the less that you can copy at a time. So right now I've got it at 250 milliseconds. If I put it all the way up here, now it's going to go really slow, and you're only going to see an occasional update. Every 2,000 it'll update. So it's not going as fast as it was going, but now it will image faster. So the slower I do that, or if I freeze the box, like I'm doing it for a sanity check most of the time myself, because I want to know what I've got isn't zeros and that the head isn't stuck and I'm getting really bad data. So I will turn that on, put it all the way to the lowest number and watch it and make sure, but then before I walk away, turn it back to freeze so that it will copy faster. So I'll do this, no, and then do this, so I can see them as they change quickly and then update those. So those are the primary features of it while it's going. There is some logging and there is the artifacts that kind of gives you just a view of what the stuff is from that standpoint. That's it. That's pretty much the beginning and the end of those pieces. So what you're doing now is waiting for each one of the passes. Now, One of the things that I'm missing sometimes that I wish was there that I haven't seen, and maybe they'll do it in an update, is just next pass. Like you go to next head, I'd like a next pass. I would like, hey, let's skip this, let's immediately go to the reverse pass in my second pass. The only way I can kind of simulate that right now is like if things weren't going good, I'm going to come right over here, I'm going to go straight to the end and go jump to that location, and then as soon as it finishes that location, it'll go backwards. So I'll be at the next pass. So my second one that I said that is in reverse with PIO mode, and then the third pass being no DMA. So in a second, when I finally get to that location, it'll turn around and start going backwards. So now it skips all the green again, does exactly like the DeepSpar does from that standpoint. There's no green, and now it's going to go backwards slower and image this drive. Most of the time, once you've started a session, and obviously I've changed the defaults of mine, but once you've started these sessions, then you can walk away and sooner or later just come back and it's just done. Whereas the DeepSpar, I look at every individual sector one by one. It is way harder to do that here. Like you literally have to keep clicking on each side and focus on that to get it to do it. You can create different sessions with different settings. So once I'm done with this, that's kind of the nice thing is I can say this one's doing pretty good, and I'm going to pause it. So I'm going to stop this session. It'll save the layout that I've already done. And now, and this is kind of a weird thing to see sometimes too. If I click someplace else and then I come back, it kind of is in a different place. Like that screen doesn't remain the same. So now I've got one session that it's reporting to me what it did, and I have a whole setup that's done. I don't have to erase this setup or change this setup. I can make a new session. So I create a new session and say, yes, this is my target drive, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to do, it has to be all sectors because I don't have any data there. So let's say I do 5 passes. I'm going to modify my 5 passes. Now this one's going to be in reverse, and this one's going to be cache different, blah, blah, blah. So I can make whatever you want, make changes. You can keep adding sessions. You can add more passes, more passes in your session. You can change how you want to handle things that are being filled, your artifacts, the whole thing. So you can make some modifications to this process. Then come down here, save that, and you'll see what will happen is when I start, it will pull all the data from the first session into the second session. And now this session will not touch anything that's green, and it will start over again in my new session. And so each one of those will overlap. And if I go back to my first session, it'll pull in all the changes that I've made to the first session. So I can go back and forth between each one of the setups, and I never have to worry about how much data I've copied. Whatever I've manipulated and got done, whatever's green is green, and it'll be fine. So it makes sense to everybody. So it is very graphical, very nice, and I will tell you that there are some times the Atolla works that the DeepSpar doesn't work, and there's other times the DeepSpar works that the Atolla doesn't work. So switching back and forth, there's a variety of times that some things just, if it just isn't working, I don't even think twice about it. I just take it over and put it on the Atolla. So if I'm working on the DeepSpar, I'll take it to the Atolla and I'll do something. So I've got Atollas running all over my office too. I have, I don't know, 7 or something like that. So basically I'm going to go through this whole thing. There's going to be 2 errors right now. At some point in time, it's either going to have to clean them up going forward or going backwards. It is probably going to clean this one up when it gets to the beginning. If I click here, when it finally gets past that green, it'll try to correct that one red line that's over there. And so you may see that happen, and then it'll just go away, because I'm pretty sure it's going to fix that. But again, it's a pretty fast imager. Most of the time I'm going to be 20 or 30% faster. So if I'm looking for just flat out speed, I'll be able to do that right here in the imaging process. Now, if I have data on the drive, that's where the difference really comes in here. Because if I have an MFT and I have files and I have a whole structure, then I can process this in the file recovery. I never have to unplug anything. I can do the whole logical recovery right here inside of the Atolla. So the Atolla itself, I'll try to show you in a second, but what would happen is, if I had MFTs, it's going to try to protect the data. So if I told it to image the metadata, it would build the MFT stuff. When it did that, it copies the MFT to the drive. And I'm in the primary drive, I can do file recovery, but the drive is going to warn me, I told it was going to warn me, so it did clean up that red one, so I'm down to 1 error. Now it's going, I'm just trying to figure out, did it change the color of my cursor? No, it looks fine over here. Okay. All right, so if I have a file recovery, I'm going to stop this so you can see what would happen. If I actually had files that I could recover, I would then, after I've imaged the metadata, just the metadata, which would be the MFT and the bitmap, I can come to file recovery. Now, I would not want to do it on this drive. You can do it live on a drive. It will let you do it. So if you want to, it will warn you. But let me just explain that this is a problem if it hasn't copied anything. So I'm going to do it so you can see what will happen, but it's going to warn me. What I would normally do after I copied the metadata is I would go to the second drive because the metadata is now there. Then I click on it and I do the same process. So right now it's going to say, are you sure that you want to do this on an original hard drive? And then your whole point is, no, I don't. I'm going to switch to the target. And it will switch you to the target and send you over there automatically to the target. So I'm on the target. So you see it switched my menu? So from here to here is what it did. Now I can go to file recovery. Now I can scan for a partition. Oh, there's no partition. And if I had one, I could actually find the files. Then it would go back and image them for me. So I really need to hook up a different source drive so you can see. There is a weird thing that happens that some source drives don't completely 100% process the metadata for some reason. I have not figured out what the bug is yet, but I have a drive that does it. So I'll show you right now. I'm going to power this drive off. Now the drive I've been using on the DeepSpar that I've given you examples of all week long, you saw it had the pictures of the hot girlfriend, right? So Francisco Pelamonte. I have somehow created a drive that will process correctly under most situations for everything, but I have created one that, at least in the last few versions, did not process correctly. So I'm going to power the drive on. I'm going to re-identify it, and I'm going to marry it to the other drive. So now I have a whole new, I have a Toshiba, and it has data on it. I'm going to go to, I would do a, not device, this is the old stuff they did for firmware. This part is abandoned. This code is just sitting there. He hasn't removed it, but it's not worth anything at this point, except for finding the password. You can do the password recovery. I don't have a password on here. That's the, remember the sound I told you sounds like, like that's it right there. Your motor's not moving. All right, so I'm going to go to imaging. I've previously had this drive hooked up. I'm going to create a new session. I'm going to write this to this target drive. Now, right here, I'm going to say all metadata. This is where it would not normally work. Right now, I would tell it to do this and copy the metadata, and it normally will not work. Even though it knows there's a partition there, it'll examine the data, and I didn't do anything to corrupt it on purpose. See, the partition is damaged, cannot do it. I do not know why. There is not a reason. There's not a reason that I can come up with that this should happen. This is actually fine and real. So they have a bug somewhere. So if you do all sectors with data, now it's going to try to do the bitmap. I think I have the same problem. I think it can't do the bitmap. Let's try it. No, it's doing it. But now this will be actual 74 gigs. Like it's going to actually do all 74 gigs of this drive. Now, for time, I don't want to wait for all 74 gigs to do this, okay? So I'm going to stop this process. Everybody happy so far? I'm going to stop this process. I'm going to do it live on the drive. It's identical to what happens if it's on the target drive, but I don't want to take all the time to wait for it to image it so that I can show it to you. It'd be 30 minutes. So I'm going to go to File Recovery. I would scan partition. And if I was on the target drive, it would not ask me this question. It would just say continue anyway. So it finds the partition. So here is Francisco Pelamonte. So this is what would have been written to the destination disk. Then I say open partition. Now it will process the entire tree, and then I could just say, hey, I would like the sexy woman photos. And then you can immediately go say recover check. When you do it on the target, it also images them. So it goes and images the sectors and then recovers them. Since I'm doing it without the target, it's just going to spit them out into a directory. So, okay. So I'm going to start the recovery, and now it's going to start spitting out those images and give me a list of what it could and couldn't do as it was imaging them. But on the target drive, it would start imaging them. It would literally touch every sector that was related to these files and image them.
And I think you can, from there also, once you've built the tree, you can say right-click and say image, can't you?
The whole tree.
The selected thing.
Yeah, the whole tree.
Well, that's one way of getting around the whole when it doesn't want to do the metadata.
Yeah.
Is if you look at the tree there, if you right-click there on the thing you selected, or the root, but any of the.
Let's just say this. Okay, what?
Yeah. Then you should be able to.
I think it does this all live. I don't think any of this will force an image.
I saw something recently on a version that maybe on.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm pretty sure that none of this forced an image. Like it didn't do, and I can't figure out why. I probably should just pack this drive up and send it to Dimitri and tell him, because
there's a problem.
Yeah, there's a problem because this drive,
I've seen that error though before.
Yeah, I see it a lot actually. I've seen it quite a few times, but only on the metadata.
Right, and I haven't thought about it enough to figure out if it's a particular brand of drive or whatever. Have you figured that out?
It's not a brand of drive. This is something to do with the data itself that it's doing. It does not. It doesn't have anything to do with the brand of drive. I could take the same image and write it to another drive, and it'd do exactly the same thing. So, no. But the nice thing about their interface is that I could do everything in the whole interface without ever leaving or using another tool. Now here's the thing: it will not carve unallocated data. It's only doing the live and active operating systems data. It is not carving that data at all. Cannot be found. Well, that's weird. Oh, I got the wrong one. So I wish there was a way that I could tell it to do that, but I'm going to do it one more time and see if I can get it to, but there's no reason that I can come up with. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the partition at all. I know there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, anyway, so that's the whole point. It did spit out some files. I interrupted it, but it did spit out some files, so you could actually see it live imaged, copied data to the local drive. Here's the partition. Here's the data. Come on. There's the pictures. So it did spit those out and do that correctly, so at least I'm able to recover the data. So That's new.
If anyone who hasn't, I mean, people who became this committee, anyone can come to it.
Oh, yeah. It's earth shattering.
So is Carlo coming, or?
He said he was. All right, so they're slowly adding more and more items to this. They do have the ability to do like DCO. You can wipe the hard drive, you can do DCO, disk editor, fill erase, and then the other one is HPAs. So you can set and clip and unclip an HPA, but all that's under these device utilities here, and then set your passwords. So you can kind of do everything in the interface and stay in the same place, and you don't accidentally break a drive or do anything, and you can't accidentally erase your hard drive because you locked the port so that the source port is write protected. So it stores your logs internally on the Atolla itself. You don't have to have the same, a bigger hard drive to write to. You can have the same size hard drive to write to because the logs are stored internally, and then you can export them. The other thing that it can do is you can write to an in-case image. So you can take a disk and you can add an image file, and when you add an image file as the destination, if I have one, you can say EO1. So that is a choice in the process. I told you it does sparse files too. One of the options somewhere is a sparse file. It's not on this one. It is image file on target. That might be there is a selection somewhere where it'll actually tell you a sparse file in the process. Which screen was that? That would be a fair go. Nope. I know it's here somewhere. Let's see if they actually have a manual. Nope, it's going to be internet based. Probably. See if they moved it. It used to actually be a selection box on the format of a disk. You could say format it and make a sparse file. Nope, it's not there. I wonder if they got rid of it. Maybe there was a bug in it. I don't see it anymore. I'm sure that's where it was. So you can create a EO1 and it will actually write the data as it's writing from one to the other as an image file. And so you can literally turn on and off compression. I feel like, if I recall, it didn't have all the same options. Like if you do this live, it does not have all the physical options to make the image file with the content in it at the same time, doing all of the recovery features.
Do you know if that's segmented?
I believe you can tell it not to be. I believe it is not a segmented file. There it is. Pre-allocated, growing. So maybe this was where the sparse... There it is. So pre-allocated does sparse, and that removes all the zeros. I'm pretty sure that this was this. So right there where it says chunk size, that was where you set that. Split or do not split. So you can now say that this is now one size. So... and then the sparse file, again, you have to be really careful at where you do this. If you do a sparse file and you do it on a Windows machine and you take it to a Linux machine and try to do it, I cannot guarantee you that the Linux box is going to do the sparse file the same way. So you need to only know that you're processing this on a PC. But it will take the zeros out of the image and make the image smaller. So why does it matter if it chunks it? Do you have a problem with it chunking or doing
We need it chunked.
for...
That's just our policy at our office.
Okay. Do you guys write them out to DVDs or CD-ROMs, or
Used to archive them out
For
there.
archiving.
is that why the rule still exists? Okay, but you don't do it anymore?
It depends on the size of the drive.
That you write it out to a CD or DVD?
Either DVD or Blu-ray.
Okay.
And then if it's really, really big, they'll let us keep it on a hard drive.
Okay. So really, really big is like 4 terabyte?
Probably 2 terabyte and up, yeah.
Okay.
Anything smaller than that, we've got to write it to media.
All right. So can you use Blu-ray most of the time and do 50 gigs at a time?
If it's available, sometimes we run out and we can't buy more, so, yeah.
So you want it to split it up. Okay, well there you go. You got custom split up sizes right there, so that would solve that problem from that standpoint. But it does have many options for dealing with image files, so at least from that standpoint you do have the ability to do DDs, do other stuff, but it will do a compressed in-case file. I've tested it, it does work, it has worked well. I have used their images with other stuff, so I have made that work. So far I at least trust that part for working, that it has worked altogether. My mouse is like going crazy here. All of these are the same. These are all the same. They just added different types, but the pre-allocated image I think is the only one that is sparse. I feel like that's the only one that you can do created sparse. I don't feel like you can do that if you don't. Right, there's no sparse selection unless I change that to either pre-allocated or growing. Okay. And anyway, so once you do that, once you create what it is that it's going to, then you would just go image it. So that becomes your target for your imaging, and you'd spit that out into its destination. So once you have the destination, then you have this image file. And so now that's what it would be to spit it out. So when you do that, it'll start the imaging process. And now this is actually writing into this file. I feel like that's most of the advanced features. So you thought you could change a head on the fly? Where did you see a head on the fly, Patrick? Is there a way to?
Yeah, I might have been thinking about the imaging process, or like the starting at the imaging settings. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so now I can actually change this on the fly. So they added this at some point recently, I guess. They keep doing updates, and I do all the updates, and then I'm looking for every single thing that changes gradually. Every once in a while, I'll get Vitaly sends me an email because he adds stuff I ask him to add, and eventually, when it gets added, he'll send that to me. So, but so that's cool. Error handling. Anything else? Pair, targets, nope. Heads, email, artifacts. This artifact thing is new. The searching for the keyword stuff has been added in the last 6 to 8 months or something like that, I think, where you can tell it to find stuff, but it's more what looks like a forensics tool would do. So I guess you could use that to at least figure out whether or not you've got evidence to look at or not, but okay. Any other things? I'm trying to remember if there's any other things that it does that are, it does have this, so you can see the power consumption while it's doing the image. There's a terminal port. It has a wire that comes off of it, and then it would switch to a terminal port. There's nothing to see here right now. I don't have it hooked up to anything. But there is a cable that comes out the back that talks to it, and this basically is a COM port. This is a, it's a standard modem type terminal. This would be all your Seagate drives. You would have to plug this in on a Seagate. And then I think this is just your standard warranty, and that's it, I think. But that's the only problem that I ever say that I have is this is the granularity. I want to be able to see more in-depth individual sectors and be able to deal with them one at a time. I mean, I do have, you do have this option down here where you can like load a sector and you can go see it and you can save an individual sector, or you can go read a sector. All of this is down here because I begged him for it, because without this I didn't feel like you could see what was going on. And so they added this. He added this about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, because of my request, and now I don't think anybody would let him pull it out of there. But this part does not exist in the task force. The task force doesn't include any kind of hex viewer at all to see any of the data while it's happening. So, anything else? Anything else that you would... The Atolla is an easier machine to use up front and does most of it automated from a standpoint of you can walk away and do anything you want, but you will struggle. I'm not, from a standpoint of if you have like 1,000 bad sectors, you're going to struggle with keep changing the settings and trying to whittle down that 1,000 bad sectors without it spending all this time going back and forth across the whole hard drive. It does take more time to be granular, but it is a more automated, full-fledged machine for the rest of it. Okay. How many of you have a Atolla? You guys have an Atolla, right?
Yeah, we have it.
You guys, and you guys are, you don't know if you're up to date though yet, right?
Yeah, we know.
Yep. Because this one was a. Yep. So I put this in August. I think there might be one version after this that I didn't install yet. There was something you could do, just like the task force had an automatic image feature. I think there is a new automatic image feature. If you plug in a drive into the Atolla, it just automatically images it.
Yeah, because I knew the task force came out with that in like December, right?
Right.
It was.
Yeah.
I didn't check to see if it came out for the.
I think it came out for the forensic unit. I don't think it's on the inside. I think it's only on the forensic unit. It was for, like, as soon as you plug in a drive, it'd just try to image it right away, I think is what. I think they had a new setting that would do that. And I remember looking at the screen thinking, I feel like I didn't really need that.
Yes, I'm never going to use it.
Like, I understand it on the task force because you walk into a company, you walk around. I've been in those shoes before, where you're at the building, you've got 32 machines in the building, and you need to image them as fast as possible. You run upstairs, take a machine apart, get the hard drive out, run downstairs, plug it in. As soon as you plug it in, it images. You grab another one off that finished, you go back, put it back where it came from, and so by the time you're done the next morning, that all the people come back to work, you've done all their machines and they're all done. So that makes sense that there would be an automatic process for it, because there's also no way to really view anything. It does its quick diagnostics and it moves on and images it. So if you didn't see the task force, I have it over there, and I had it hooked up the other day, but I can hook it back up. It's on the floor right now, so we could do the soldering. But it's a very small subset of all the stuff I just showed you. There's pretty much just diagnostics, and imaging. None of this other stuff exists. None of this is here. There's 2 buttons on the utilities. It is fill or erase and clip and unclip DCO. Those are the only HPAs and DCOs. That's it. There's no other settings on there that they carried over. So none of this other stuff is here. And it does have a feature to make in-case images. So there is a feature there. It's buried. It's buried in the menus, but it's there. It's further down in the menus.
That's the task force.
Yes, the task force has it in the menus. There's a setting for a destination, and you can create an in-case image, and you can have it dump them all to in-case images on a destination drive, but you have to tell the task force to format the drive. So it formats its own drive and then creates the in-case image on it, and then when you plug stuff in, it'll automatically make in-case images. But you have to be careful, because on the task force you can do one thing that overwrites all the images you have created. So there is one spot where if you hook up a new hard drive and you say, well, I don't want you to image this, I want you to make a clone of it, it'll clone over the drive that you imaged your in-case images on. It'll clone to that drive and erase them. So it is, I feel like it's a bug, but it's because someone didn't know what they were using when they were doing it. But there's no warning. Hey, I'm using this for all these in-case images. It'll ask you, do you want to erase it? You say yes, and so yes, of course you wanted to erase it. It had all your in-case images on it. So all of these are all the options. You can just keep changing all your options, but every time that you want to change, this is the only thing that I think, I'm trying to remember, so this did not used to work on the fly. Like, you used to have to stop a session, and if you wanted to do this, you couldn't make these changes on the fly. So now you can. So you used to have to stop and recreate the session, and now I told it to go forward, and now I can do it on the fly. But it did not used to let you do it on the fly. So they have gradually changed some of those things. I mean, I like having the big overview picture. I just want a more granular picture of everything as well. So I don't know why too. So when I did this image, I know I did it in this Toshiba drive as an in-case image. It is not color coding my heads. Obviously, I have heads and I have individual heads, and you can see them right here. But I don't know why it is not currently color coding my heads.
Hit the legend button. I don't remember if that lets you select the colors for it.
If you did what?
That might not be it. I thought there was a way you could change the head colors.
I think it might be on the same menu. It might have been on the same, but it did not automatically. No, it did not automatically change my head colors when I did this. I'm wondering if it's a difference in. Huh?
It looks like it's showing it. Go back to the engine.
There we go. So why didn't it do it before? Why is it doing it now?
I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know.
I mean, why did it all of a sudden start doing it? That's weird. When did it start doing it? Did it do it because I did the legend button, or did it do it?
It did it after you hit the imaging settings.
Maybe it's a bug. I don't know. Maybe I switched back and forth and. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I've noticed that before. I mean, it's obviously not a critical bug, but because the color coding does at least give you the idea that your heads. But I mean, I had multiple heads in the first place. So, all right. Anyway, so that's kind of the whole rundown that I've got from the standpoint. There's a lot of little things, but as a whole, that's generally the entire process that we run it. I mean, it's like I have 3 running at least all the time in my office, and every single thing that we're done with something else, we'll throw it on this, or we'll clone something, or we'll make a DD image with it, and do basically the same thing that we're doing with the Falcon, except that This can obviously do damage sectors and the Falcon can't. It'll crash. It won't deal with it at all. So, any other questions? How's everybody doing on their drives? Everybody's rebuilt drives, everybody's got them running, everybody's happy? No? Doug, you're not happy? What's up?
It seems to be the same issues with each one with the head. Can't get the head alignment, it's just frustrating.
Well, is it all the same drives, different brands, different?
Brand, so it's all the same thing. Like,
So the common denominator is you.
yes, that's what I'm saying, it's frustrating.
All right.
So with this one, I've gotten to this point where.
Well, yeah,
it's
see, that's still not, that's still not reading the,
Right, so.
did you ever at any point yet, when you've been doing this one, have you seen an INX
No.
blink at all?
Yeah.
No.
Because I was even moving around a little bit and it was giving me good data, so. Yeah, it's all about.
You want me to see if I can,
Go backwards right now, see what we can.
let me get rid of my microphone.